Namaste, welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in straight away. Forgive me for wearing this. I've not gone mad and developed a Messiah complex. I simply find this a little more comfortable when I'm out here for long periods of time meditating or making these videos. So that's why I've got this on. It just feels a little more appropriate. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 1. I'm going to be doing a series of 6, and the reason I'm making these videos is because I've been getting so many messages and there are so many comments that are telling me that the meditation videos are so helpful for a lot of people, and I'm getting the feeling and I'm getting the energy from people that these meditative principles are really resonating, particularly at this time now with the current situation that we're in. But it's kind of beautiful in a way because everything that I'm going to be talking about can be applied to all of the situations in our lives that we find stressful, anxious, worrying, all of these sorts of things. So I wanted to go a little deeper into these principles. If you don't know me and you don't follow my videos so far on Facebook and things, and you found this through other means, then essentially a quick bit about my background is that I used to suffer with severe mental health issues, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, and I was quite overweight as well. I was obese, type 2 obese. Whether you want to class that as a mental health issue or not, I'll leave that up to you. But a big part of my recovery and a huge part of my transformation has been the meditative practices that I have found and the meditative principles at work. So let's get into it. Let's go a little deeper into some of these things. But I will start all of this, and this is unusual. You won't see this in many YouTube videos. You won't hear it from many people. But essentially, the reason I've been resisting doing longer form things like this is because the more I explain it, the more I have completely missed the point. And this may not make sense to you right now, but by the end of this series of 6 videos, it will make perfect sense to you when I say the more I talk about this, the more I have completely missed the point of all of these teachings. As the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, those who say do not know. Those who know do not say. And the Zen school of Buddhism they call it the silent teaching, because there is no greater teacher than silence. So I will begin by explaining the very basic principle, and if you are in the right place and you really want to find peace and you really want to find that deeper, more spacious place within you, you can learn everything that you need to know just based on this one principle, and this principle is presence. It is beautifully simple. It is so effective because you already have absolutely everything within you that you need to find peace, serenity, and happiness. You arrived with it, and you have it right now. You just don't know it yet. Bringing yourself into presence means you accept and allow everything as it is within the present moment. And this can be done anywhere, at any time. You simply bring yourself into the present. Now, herein lies the issue. Because simple, yes. Easy, hell no. Hell no. Is it easy to bring yourself into presence? It becomes much, much easier the more you practice meditation, and the more you align yourselves with some of these principles, absolutely. But a huge part of the problem is the fact that we're conditioned to resist and avoid everything that happens within the present moment. So herein lies the issue. And this is sort of principle number 1 that I'd like to talk about, is why we find it so hard to remain present. Now, everybody actually already knows what it's like to be fully present. You will have experienced before, you've merely forgotten it. And what did you forget? What did you forget? I'll ask you that. That's my first question to you. What have you forgotten? Dig deep and really look, because it's there. When you were a child, can you remember when you were out playing in the field and you were playing with friends and you were running around? You didn't have a care in the world. You were simply enjoying what the moment had for you. Beautiful sunny day, you're playing with your friends, you're out of breath, you're sweating, you smell the grass, you had the sun on your skin without a care in the world, and then all of a sudden the school bell goes. Oh, isn't that a horrible feeling? That school bell goes and you have to come in and you have to sit down and they put some paper in front of you and you have to get to work. And this is very difficult for a child to do because, well, I was just outside and I was enjoying this, so I don't understand why I now have to sit down and do this. And the teachers are kind of a little baffled and they have to find a way to get you to sit still and do this work. And I'm not saying that this is evil or this is wrong, because it's all part of this beautiful play. In order to get you to sit still, they have to really hammer home the importance of the future. And there are these exams coming up and you have to learn, and we have to give you all of this information because the future is coming up and the future is going to be incredibly challenging, and you must perform well at these things so that when this time in the future comes, you are adequately prepared. And this is essentially the conditioning that is making it so difficult for you now to remain present. Because the moment you sit still and you start to enjoy the present moment, the mind starts to chatter away. But this is not your natural mind. This is your conditioned mind. Your natural mind wishes to remain present. It wishes to merely stay here. So it's this conditioning that is making it so much more difficult to remain within that present moment and that present moment alone. The natural mind in its natural state wishes to stay here. So this is what can be done. We are essentially, when we go into meditative practice and we practice the meditative principles, because it doesn't always have to be formal meditation, and often there's this misconception that oh yes, in order to sort of find this peace, then I must have a set number of minutes per day that I sit in this formal meditation, and then I will feel a certain percentage better after a certain number of weeks. The beautiful thing about this is that you can feel so much more peaceful and calm right now, today, here. They sometimes call it the sudden school, because people all the time simply get it. It happens all the time. They call it Satori or Kensho, where all of a sudden you've just got it. You're just right there. And it didn't take years and years of formal practice and all of this reading and chanting and I need to go to a monastery and all of this. It happens all the time where people just spontaneously wake up. And you can do it. You simply need to have a level of courage and confidence to let go. That's all it takes, is just a letting go. And the current situation that we're in is providing a phenomenal opportunity for us to do exactly this, to simply let go, because the universe has done a vast majority of it for you. Job gone, money doesn't mean anything. The whole situation has completely gone. So all that remains for you now is just to let go of a little more. Just let it go. So we don't need a huge amount of formal practice or formal training. It's just a principle of aligning yourself with the present moment. And by doing so, we are beginning to dissolve the conditioning that has come in to the mind. And I will challenge you to remain present and watch the feelings of resistance that come up. Because the feelings of resistance are the conditioned feelings. And I will ask you, whose voice is it? When you sit still and you try to do this presence, and you try to, right, what is it that Corinne's talking about? Right, sit there and be present. Okay, I'm going to sit here and be present. Whose voice is it that comes in and starts saying, you don't have time for this? This is silly. This isn't going to work for you. She's talking a load of nonsense. It's not going to work. It's not going to work for you. Whose voice is that? Because it's not your voice, and it's not the natural voice, and it's not your present voice, your voice of being. It is somebody else's voice. Take a look at that. Take a look at that. So, something that happens here is that you begin to watch the conditioned mind. And by watching the conditioned mind, this is a phenomenally powerful practice, because it's important to stay with it there. It really is important to stay with it at that point, because you might feel you're not getting any peace out of this. It's like, well, I'm sat here, I think I'm present, I think I'm secure in the present moment, but I'm not really feeling a sense of peace and serenity. What I'm actually feeling is a level of tenseness arising in me as I watch the conditioned mind. Now, this is where it is most important to stay with it, because you might not feel immediately peaceful, but watching the conditioned mind and watching where the thoughts are going and where the thoughts come from, this is a phenomenally powerful practice, because you are beginning to distance yourself and recognizing that your thoughts aren't the full story, that your thoughts are not the full picture at all. Here is where a huge amount of your suffering comes from. We have our natural state of being and our natural state of peace. And this is the position that you are always in, because I'll ask you, when is it never not the present moment? Have you ever experienced the future? Have you ever been there? Have you ever woken up 2 weeks from now? And have you ever experienced the past? Have you ever woken up and, I'm a couple of years ago. I hated it here. Nightmare. It's going to take me forever to get it. It sounds silly, right? But this is what the mind is having you believe. The mind is a liar in so many ways. It can be incredibly helpful and it can be a friend, but in so many ways the mind is a liar. It projects you with all kinds of false things. Even when you are projecting your ideas of the future, you're doing so in the present moment. And even when you're remembering things from the past and you feel you're going back to the past, you are doing so within the present moment. You see here, distractions, they're trying to take my mind away. And they're trying to take my mind away from the focus of the present moment. But I have the choice to remain here, to remain present, and to remain focused. It's always a choice. So, that's the number one principle, is presence. And really, interestingly, the beginning point is also the end point. It never needs to get more complicated than that. In fact, this is where the problem lies, because the mind likes information. And the mind, you may find this urge of, okay, I'm starting to get it a little bit. I'm starting to understand the principle at work here. And you might find some more confidence and courage by knowing that this is the same message that every single teacher throughout history has ever given. The Buddha said the same thing. It's the same in Hinduism, the same in Zen. Even if you look at Jesus' teachings, the actual core message was exactly the same thing. He said the kingdom of God resides within man. And this means that heaven exists within you. It's not a place you can go. It is not something that happens in the future. It exists within you, and it exists within you now. Give no thought for the morrow. Watch the lilies of the field. They neither toil nor spin. Yet Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. Simply put, by giving no thought to the morrow, by simply existing, and by simply being, the lilies of the field are more beautiful than anything that man could create. The Buddha found the same thing, and even if you look to more modern teachers now, like Eckhart Tolle, however you want to pronounce the name, he wrote The Power of Now. It's one of the best-selling spiritual books of all time, and he points towards simply remaining present. And in the present moment, there can be no suffering. How can anxiety exist if you recognize truly that the future does not exist? How can anxiety still be here? You begin to realize the falseness of it all. If I was to ask you, what is true for you right now? What is true for you right now, in the present moment and the present moment alone? Not your projections, not your images, not your concepts, not your opinions, not your beliefs. All of these things, simply drop them. Drop them right now. All of your images, your projections, your ideas of the future, drop it. Drop the past also. Take a look at what is actually here, the reality of the situation, the physical, present reality. Take a look. I'm going to have to stop this video and put two together. I'll be back when this subsides a little. Back. See, it's such a beautiful thing when you recognize that challenges can also be huge opportunities. Because naturally I had to stop that video then and wait for the noise to sort of subside, and doing so just gave me a little bit of space and a little bit of silence to just bring my focus back in. So we have a principle of gratitude, which will be in a later video, but I can say now, thank you, thank you, thank you for the distraction, for the noise. Thank you to the universe. Even if there isn't a will at work, I can still say thank you and express gratitude for the distraction, because it allowed me a little space so I can go deeper into this. So I've been hammering home about presence, and the reason that presence is so crucial and so key is because it helps to dissolve away the delusion, the illusions, and the phantom world that we imagine into existence. So that's the second principle that I'm going to be talking about a little, is our sense of self. And a huge amount of the reason we suffer is because we have a projected image of ourself. So Corinne Bryant, the person, is incredibly fragile. It's a very fragile concept because I have this image in my mind of what this person is, and I have a concept of what this person is. And this image is fragile because it can be attacked, and it can be doubted, and it can be weakened, and it can be destroyed. And a lot of the time in our daily life we are struggling to present this image of that self, the false self, to the world. And it's especially true on things like social media. Everything is very sort of edited and filtered so that we can present the false self to the world. And this causes a lot of suffering because often the rest of the world doesn't then perceive that image the same way that we've projected it. And it causes us an enormous amount of suffering when we feel that false self is not validated, when we feel like the world isn't acknowledging that self. So that false self is very fragile. It's a very shaky place to be. And it's the same when it comes to your opinions and your beliefs and all of these projections about the world, because the moment that the world doesn't fit your image and it doesn't fit your belief and your opinion, this causes us this inner resistance because you thought things were a certain way. And this is a particular reason for our stress and our suffering at the moment, because we had in our head this idea that society was a certain way, and month by month by month it was all going according to plan. Just about. I mean, as according to plan as it can do, but it doesn't go according to plan, does it? Life, it never does. So what's happened recently with all of this happening is that our projected image of how society should go and how life should go has been completely interrupted by something unforeseen that has come in and started happening. And this is causing us a huge amount of stress because we resist this. And this is why I want to go into talking a little bit about acceptance. And acceptance has been absolutely key and crucial in my recovery and in my transformation. Because by accepting the world around you and by allowing the universe to do what the universe needs to do, you free up this huge amount of energy and you release this spaciousness and this clearness within you, because you are no longer trying to resist and you are no longer trying to force the world into the image that you've projected. So to tie that into this idea and this image of the false self is that here is your false self. You believed you were your job, you believed you were your bank account, you believed you were all of your possessions, all of your family, all of your friends, all of your history, and you believed that you were going somewhere in future. And now all of a sudden that has been threatened and in some cases completely destroyed. Maybe you lost your job, maybe the job's in question. Maybe even your health is in question, maybe your money is in question. All of your plans for the future have now been either completely destroyed or are questioned. And it was only a few months ago they were rock solid. Now, here is where you find the peace, by accepting what has happened. Accept that this is the situation. Now, this is not to say you throw your hands up, wash your hands of the whole thing and say, oh, I'm done. Fine, I accept it. I'll be miserable, my life has been completely destroyed. No. Accept that the falseness has been destroyed, the falseness has been removed, and you are now finally free to find your being. Because the true self cannot be threatened. The true self cannot be threatened. It needs no defense. Take it back to that presence. Take it into that acceptance. What is here, right now, in the present moment, that requires any stress? What requires any worry? Does your heart not beat itself? Will your heart, if you stop worrying, oh God, will your heart stop beating? Will you stop breathing? Will the sun not come up and go down? You haven't planned any of this. You haven't created any of this. It just is. And it has been that way since day one. And there is only one day. What could be simpler than this? It doesn't need you. You are it. It doesn't need your involvement to continue. Life, your life as you envision it, is the life, the false sense of self as you envision it. That's the part that needs control, and it needs all of this effort to force things into place. But how often do things go to plan? They just don't. And this is when we suffer, when things supposedly go wrong. But in the present moment, nothing can go wrong, because it simply is. And whatever is, is. So bringing it in to that present moment, that acceptance and allowance of all things, the beauty here is that we can drop the past, drop any of your past hurts, drop any of your past regrets, drop any projections you have about how things should be right now. Because nothing will ever go to plan. So you can drop that projection because you're trying to force things into a shape. And by trying to force things into a shape, you are setting yourself up for suffering. Because you're attempting to put rigidity and framework into something that is ultimately illusory. You can create a space of peace and of spaciousness by giving yourself that power of acceptance and allowing, to allow all to flow through, flow through, flow through, including thoughts and feelings, sounds, sensations, all of it. This is the place of peace. And you will notice that you don't suddenly stop doing all of the things that create your stability in the material world. So it's not as if, oh, well, if I remain completely present, am I just going to stop going to work? If I remove, so Corin, right, okay, this sounds all well and good, all right? This sounds a little bit metaphysical and airy-fairy, sure, but this isn't going to help me in the practical world, because you keep calling it the false self, and I accept that this is probably quite insulting to say that everything you believe about yourself is false, but trust me, it is, and I don't mean to insult you, I mean to point you towards a more true place and a more authentic place within you, the place that can't be threatened. So you say, without this sense of self, how can I do my job? How can I make plans for the future? Well, you can still make plans, provided you're within the present moment. But all of a sudden you'll be making plans that are more authentic and true to you. You will also be doing so without this sort of tendency for attachment and clinging. And in order to really move towards what you actually want, you must recognize that a lot of what you supposedly want, you don't actually want. And you never wanted in the first place. But the conditioned mind says that you want this thing. So you've been putting so much time and energy and effort into making money, into getting laid, into creating an image for yourself, into gaining something in the world, material or conceptual, to gain recognition. You have projected that this is what you want in life. But I'm going to point you towards that deeper place, that present place, and ask yourself, what do you actually want? Not the false you, not the conditioned you, but what does you, in the present moment, actually want? You might find it is much closer than you first believed. You won't suddenly stop going to work by practicing these principles. In fact, you will find work is so much more productive and so much more enjoyable by applying these principles and applying these practices. For me, I found that my work situation improved so much more because I wasn't so anxious and I wasn't so low and I wasn't so stressed. I could move about the world in a much more reasonable and a much calmer way as a result of remaining true to what actually is, because you're far more likely to pursue a career that you are actually passionate about, because you finally recognize and really feel that money's a load of rubbish. It actually is. And everything that you've imagined for yourself in the future is a load of rubbish. The most important thing is to be happy and peaceful and content in the moment. And you are far more likely to seek out work that fulfills you. And guess what? This curious opposite nature to all things, which will be the last episode, episode 6. The curious opposite nature is that when you let go of trying to find these material things, you will find they come to you. Because you're working from a passionate place, from an authentic place, and the quality of your work will increase, and by increasing the quality of your work, the material rewards will come. But if you try and do these things for the material reward, it'll never come. That is everything for episode 1 of this series of 6. Hopefully episode 2 is a little quieter. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe, because that's how you know when the next episodes are going to be, by hitting that subscribe button, and hit like so I know that these messages and these words have resonated. And if you really enjoyed it and you feel like some of this has been useful for you, please consider hitting that share button. It helps me to get my work out and to get my message across. A huge part of this is that I feel it's my duty now to get across these principles and these practices that have helped me so much, because I used to have the sort of anxiety that meant I couldn't even leave the front door It sounds ridiculous to me now, but I used to not be able to even go out of my front door. And now I can stand on stages in front of people and take fitness classes, and it doesn't trouble me at all. It really, I don't say that from an arrogant place. I try not to say it from an arrogant place, but it just doesn't bother me in the same way. Life doesn't threaten me in the same way. And I can be much more productive as a result of all of these principles, and so much more at peace. And I see so much suffering going on, particularly at the moment, that is utterly unnecessary. All of it is totally unnecessary. So much of it is, anyway. So I want to try and get this across, because it's only a few simple practices, and it will add so much more value to your life. Thank you for listening. Stay well out there. I look forward to hearing your questions, hearing your comments.